Welcome from the League of Women Voters. I'm Ruth Ann Webster. I'm currently serving as the president of the New Ulm League of Women Voters. And just in case you don't know, the League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization. Well, how can you be political and nonpartisan? Well, let me tell you this. Political parties are partisan and politicians are partisans, but issues are not partisans. Issues and problems and solutions are not partisan. They belong to all of us, and that's what the League of Women Voters focuses on, issues. And tonight, this is the first of a series of 4. Our Facebook is going to be talking about this, but this is the first of 4 public forums that all sort of came out of energy awareness. And so we've morphed into tonight's program, which is all about yards, which is, she'll explain, Megan Benage will explain this much better than I will, but we are looking at environment and neighborhood-friendly yards. And Megan will explain how this can save you energy, save the planet, save your sanity. It's going to be wonderful. All right, Megan, it's up to you.
It's always good when you get applause at the beginning, because then you don't feel bad if you don't get it at the end. You've already feel like you've really accomplished something. So it's good to see so many people here on a Thursday night. I will try my best not to just melt into a puddle under these lights. You guys are all going to be very cool. It's climate change up here. I'm experiencing it. So I'm Megan Benage. I work for the Minnesota DNR. I won't make jokes about that. Like I'm here, like I work for the government. I'm here to help. You know, I won't say things like that. Maybe I will. We don't know. But I'm a regional ecologist, and usually when I tell people that, they go, huh, nice. And then I say, do you know what ecologists do? And they go, yeah. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? And they're like, look at stuff, like outside stuff, like, you know, things that like fly and grow and stuff. Close. So when I give talks to school groups, I usually say, I'm an ecologist. Do you kids know what that means? And I won't embarrass you by making you raise your hand. And the kids usually raise their hand. You know, there's always one in every class that's like, me, pick me. I know, pick me. Never pick that kid. That is the lesson. But of course I did. I picked that kid. And then he was like, I got it. You studied the economy. And at the same time, I go, not even close. And his teacher goes, great guess! And so then you automatically know what kind of households we were raised in. Okay? So, and then I just said, well, you know, I like to bring that joke out for talks like this, because if you were thinking we were going to talk about money, actually in this presentation we will, but I'm not going to help you like balance your budget. That's a different kind of e-scientist. That's not me. So we are going to talk about lawns and native plants, and I'm guessing that you're all here because we're at that part of sort of winter right now where it's like, I'm ready to be outside. You're teasing me with these 70-degree days. I'm ready to see things that are green and growing and happy. So we'll get into that. We always start with the DNR's mission. So here it is. You saw it. That's who I work for, and that's what I'm part of. So our mission, you know, we do steward natural resources. I like to use the word steward instead of manage, because management implies that we have some kind of ownership or control over the land, and we certainly don't. And then I have this picture up here of my adorable cousin. Look how happy she is. Look at that little monarch on her nose. She's not scared at all. She's not that kid that's like, bugs! She's that kid who grew up to be a wildlife biologist. And I put this picture here because everything that we're going to talk about tonight is really about the joy that nature brings you. And wouldn't you want to bring that joy to your yard? You don't even have to travel. Like, you can just save gas by going to your yard. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. There's me when I'm in field clothes. The League of Women Voters asked me if I was going to wear my uniform tonight. And I was like, I don't have a uniform. So I'm not a park ranger. I'm not uniform staff. This is about as fancy as it gets, a polo shirt with a little logo. But there's a beautiful prairie behind us there, and here's me talking to some plants in a calcareous fen. So I am lucky to have a job where I absolutely love what I do. Right here, all of these yellow counties, that's my region. So I cover 32 counties in southern Minnesota. So it's also good that I like to drive because I'm driving a lot. So, and in case you're wondering, besides the economy, what do you do? An ecologist is a type of scientist that looks at all of the parts and pieces of nature, including people. We're absolutely part of it. If you don't believe me, please hold your breath for the duration of the presentation. Let me know how it goes, okay? Nobody's ever made it. So I just, it's a thing. We all breathe air, right? So we're all part of this. We're all connected to the things that the earth is graciously giving us. So my job is to look at all of those parts and pieces, and then as I look at all of them, how are they interacting? How are they doing together? So I think of the 3 pillars that hold our world together as diversity, connection, and community. Without those 3 things, we don't really survive, and we certainly don't thrive. We need those things. And if you don't believe me, don't worry. I'm going to convince you, or at least we'll get close. So we're going to talk a little bit about these things. Oh, team, I forgot to start my timer. Let me just tell you that staying on time is not my strong suit. So we have to start a timer so that way, after I spend 25 minutes on the first 3 slides, I just talk really fast through the last 22. So that way we get you out of here on time. Because the library folks do want to go home at some point. So I apologize because the first part of this talk is, it's a little hard, it's a little depressing. It's about the state of our world, things that are happening. But what I like to do is bring you down and then bring you back up. So we're gonna end with a little bit of hope. So it's not all gonna be sad. So first, I'm not jumping right into lawns. I'm talking a little bit about pollinators because these most likely are gonna be the things that come to your yard. If you came tonight and you were like, I'm hoping for a bison, it's not gonna happen, okay? You gotta go to Minneopa for that. You're gonna take the drive. Those are the things. So most of the time in your lawn, you're gonna be attracting smaller, but just as adorable wildlife like pollinators. So in Minnesota, we have many. In this picture, it's a trick. Which one of them in the picture isn't a pollinator in Minnesota? Do you need me? You like the little roll? Go like this.
The monarch.
It gives me a break from the light too.
The monarch.
No, they count.
The sun.
Now you're just getting sassy. The sun. Like, out of the wildlife. Which one's not a pollinator? The bat. Why do you think a bat isn't a pollinator in Minnesota?
We don't have enough cactus.
We don't have night blooming plants.
Right.
So that is why. They are out at night. What a bat is, however, is a great, great, great pest control for mosquitoes. So if you see a bat, get happy because it means that you're going to have less mosquitoes, hopefully. So they don't control the whole population, but they eat tons of them. And we have to talk about bees just a little bit. They're cute. Don't panic. So bees are our most important pollinator. Why do you think that is? Because we just like them? Because they're fuzzy? Some of them are... Yeah. What'd you say?
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere, so they must be the most important.
And they do fruit trees.
They do what?
Fruit trees.
Sometimes, yes. So they do that, but they do something else. Bees are one of our only pollinators that actually actively pollinate. What? What you talking about? So bees collect pollen and nectar. Most other pollinators are visiting that flower, collecting nectar, and they accidentally pollinate. So their foot slips into a pollen sac, they pick it up, they crawl and collect nectar to another part of the flower, and they accidentally lose that pollen sac. Bees collect pollen, stick it to their bodies, and then take it to other flowers. The other things that bees do is they do something called flower constancy, which means that they visit the same species. So if you're a bee and you collect pollen from a milkweed, and then you go to a liatris, are you pollinating? No, they're not the same species. They don't have the same pollen. But bees don't do that. they go from a milkweed to a milkweed to a milkweed to a milkweed. How about that? And they're adorable. In Minnesota, our bee list is still, this number is wrong, we have over 500 different kinds of bees. So the DNR just started redoing the bee list in 2019. And the last time we had a bee list before that, it was completed in 1919. You remember it because of the root beer. So that's the last time we had a bee list, and it had about 40 species on it. We have 500 and counting. 500 different kinds of bees. And the reason why I want you to focus on that or know that is because every species that we have in the environment is doing some critical part of something. It's connected to something. So you wouldn't necessarily think that, like, who likes chocolate, for example? Okay, that's usually a winner, right? Who's pollinating chocolate? Not a bee, it's a fly. We have to give the credit to the fly. Who's pollinating coffee? Bees. So two things that you might not be able to make it through your day without, you can thank tiny winged insects for. And so bees have these wildly amazing life cycles, and they look at them. Look at how they're looking. Some of them are chubby and cute. Some of them have ginormous eyes, kind of terrifying a little bit. And I love it when people, this guy, Sam Trogi, he loves to photograph bees face on because he says it's how you meet someone. So you should be greeting somebody face to face. And so I just think that's a really cute thought, like that, that you're meeting all of these bees. Most bees also don't sting. Most wasps don't sting. But we hear a lot about the ones that do, and so then that causes panic. I have, obviously I have a very wild native yard, and my neighbor all the time, she is terrified of bees, which I understand. She doesn't want to get stung. She has an allergy. And so she said to me the other day, I love what you've done with your yard. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Just keep the bees on your side. And I was like, oh, not a problem. I have made small leashes and we're ready to go. She has a good sense of humor too. She's like, Megan! And then it's fine. But it's just kind of amazing. And then here's the depressing part. So you might have seen in the last couple of years all of these sort of sensational articles coming out. Collapse of nature, insects plummeting, how can we possibly live? The apocalypse is here. And what I want to tell you is that it's not necessarily good news, but it's not necessarily an apocalypse either. And there's still time to turn it around. And this starts with you. Your yards can be that change. So in the first chart, what I mean by that is this chart. Basically what it's showing is that through time, roughly, of all insects that we have documented, there's about 33% decline, with strong variation amongst the orders of insects. I always kind of hate charts like this because I'm like, how do I read this? But it's like 60% decline of Coleoptera, which are beetles, and then you've got a percentage, let's call it 10, that are increasing out of that order. So it's highly variable, but it's not super positive either, especially if you're a grasshopper.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking to yourself, awesome, I hate those things. What do you think eats a grasshopper? Everything up the food chain. Everything higher than it wants to eat a grasshopper. Filled with protein, fat little snack, spit out the legs, good to go. Now, like, the birds don't care. They eat the legs all the way. So when we have a collapse of insects, we start to see collapses higher up the food chain. And that is what is a real problem. So the second chart is basically just showing over the last 40 years, there's a 40% decline overall of all other invertebrates. But our insect invertebrate ecologist would tell me to make sure to caution you, we only know about 20% of the total insect diversity. So we see a 40% decline, but we only know 20%. So there's so much that we don't know. And some are okay, but you know, some are legitimately declining. Why are they declining? So the main drivers, one, habitat change. Number one, pollution, biological traits, and then climate change. And if you're thinking to yourself, climate change, you're fourth, nothing to worry about. Like, a lot of times those habitat changes and the pollution and not the biology, but they're all, like climate change could be in all of these, and it will impact all of these. So that's not entirely rosy either. And like I said, insects are declining, and when insects decline, other things decline too. So pretty alarming is that we have 3 billion less birds than we used to have. That's a big number. If we talk about grassland birds, we've lost half of them in the last 50 years. Half in the last 50 years. What that tells us is we're doing things to the environment that we need to literally survive that aren't sustainable. What do I mean by that? If you keep doing those things, we will edge ourselves out. And so we need to figure out, how do we have the things that we know and love, like we're here in New Ulm, right? Minnesota is a highly agricultural state, 27 million acres in agriculture. But how do we do that? How do we be an agricultural state and make sure that things are in balance? How do we get back to balance? So that's kind of part of my job. So how do we get back to balance? It's easy, don't worry, I'm on it. Like, no big deal. And it matters because we depend on insects. I already spoiled it and told you about flies and chocolate and coffee, but look at all these other things. Can you imagine a summer without watermelon? What about a fall without pumpkins? You need insects for these. You need pollinators for these. You don't have them without them. One of the invertebrate ecologists at the University of Minnesota said to me once, everything interesting that we eat is because of an animal pollinator. So if you think about it like that, what would you be eating? And of course, if you're talking to a school class, they're like, awesome, broccoli's gone. You're like, oh, that's not really the message, kids. So you gotta like direct their eyes to the chocolate right in the middle, and then you pull them back in. But you gotta think about the things that you would eat if you didn't have insects. I don't want a summer without blueberries. Do you? I don't want one without salsa. Think about all the things. That's what tomatoes are to me. They're salsa. They're not tomatoes. They're salsa. So, everything is all connected. And then if I haven't fully convinced you, when we lose insects, we lose color. The world goes to black and white and green because you still have pine trees and corn. What a world. What else do you need? Pine trees and corn. I mean, that's not entirely accurate, but you can see that you start to lose a lot of the interesting parts of our landscape. So what do? How do we fix some of this? We have to start thinking about every space that we're in as an opportunity. Every space you're in is an opportunity. So in the first graphic right here, this is pre-development. Look at all these tall trees, and there's some shrubs, and it's showing that we only have roughly in this natural system about 4% runoff. That's a healthy system. And then as you move over to post-development, look at this nice little German house here that I picked. It's a nice little house. It's got a little driveway, but as soon as you start paving surfaces, you start getting more runoff. So the goal isn't necessarily, after you leave here, I'm not suggesting that you all camp in a Minnesota State Park for the rest of your life. It's not the suggestion. But how do you take away some of these hardscape surfaces and catch the water before it gets into the storm drain? How do you do that? Because we're going to live in a house, right? It's happening. I'm going to live in a house. I guess I shouldn't tell you what you're going to do, but that's what I'm going to do. At the end of this, I'm not tenting it. So this also is just a little bit, I told you it's depressing in the beginning. Stay with me. So this is showing again what it looks like when you're in a natural condition, this lower peak after you get a heavy rain, versus the peaks that we have now. And we see this in our streams, right? And in the Minnesota River and the Cottonwood River. Super flashy, lots of flooding, erosion all on the side banks, and then nothing, right? And we want to try to fix that a little bit. These are also some climate impacts. This picture, I shouldn't like it, but I do, because what if you just really wanted a crunch wrap? You're out of luck today, friends. So we know that flooding and erosion And even extreme drought, which we've been in for the last 3 years, southern Minnesota is still, actually almost all of Minnesota is still abnormally dry. So we did not get the moisture that we would want to get over the winter to pop out of that. Why is that important? I mean, in some ways it's nice because it means you don't have to mow your lawn as much, but in other ways it's bad because we're all using water constantly. We don't just stop using water. And water is what gives us life. This is an aerial view of the Mississippi River after the big floods that we had basically before this period of drought. It looks nice, right? It's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's good. What's all this brown stuff? It's soil. Good job. A+, whoever said soil and not dirt. It's soil. You're right. It's soil. Soil's alive. Dirt is dead. So it's soil that ran off into the land. When we talk to school kids and we say, what color is the Minnesota River? What do you think they always say? No. School kids say blue. And I go, have you ever been there? You guys need to get out, take a trip. You're right. It's brown. The Cottonwood's brown. Why is it brown? It shouldn't be. It was described by indigenous people as a place that was so clear that you could see the sky reflected in the water. Can you see, and the indigenous people are still here today, right? But can you imagine seeing the sky reflected in the Minnesota River? I can't, but I hope for it. I hope that the things that we do will get there. So a couple weeks ago, and by a couple weeks ago I mean last year, I'm starting to talk like farmers talk. The other day when I was talking to you, you mean 6 months ago when we were talking? But last year, a University of Minnesota professor was giving a talk about if native plants are better than turf, right? And he was talking about native plants' ability to provide water and store carbon. And then he gave some of these numbers, and I'm going to break them down for you. You didn't know there'd be math, but there's math. Yay! So basically, in the top one of the soil, every 1% of organic matter gives you 0.2 to 1.2 inches or more of water holding capacity, which means, depending on the kind of soil you have, you can store 3,400 to 20,000 gallons per acre more if you have organic matter. If you're like, that's great, what's organic matter? Organic matter is the stuff that makes soil that dark, rich, humusy color. It's rich, deep prairie soils that we're on. And so healthy soils have a higher percentage of organic matter because they've had more time to build it. Or maybe I shouldn't say healthy, I should say remnant prairie soils have higher organic matter. So if you think about, you could potentially store 27,000 gallons in an acre inch of soil. Now let's do some more math. So in Minnesota, prairies have 8 to 10% organic matter, okay? Compared to conventionally farmed prairie soil or conventionally farmed soils, and what I mean by that is soils that are tilled. That's what I mean. I'm not talking about people who are doing cover cropping or reduced tillage or other things. They typically have anywhere between 3 and 5%. So if you're comparing a prairie soil that has native plants on it to a conventional ag soil, we can store in the prairie 5,440 to 240,000 gallons per acre in that soil. Can you imagine that? I had to break it down. So in an 8-inch rainfall, that's 5 to 240 tanker trucks more. And if I was cool, I would have then put on the slide all the tanker trucks. But I didn't do that because I didn't have time. So that's pretty incredible. And he got done with this and he's waiting, and we're all sort of, pun intended, absorbing this information, much like the prairie absorbs an 8-inch rain. And I got up to talk and I showed this picture and I go, duh. Look at the roots on these things. Of course they can hold that. Think about the roots when you've pulled out a corn plant and you're putting it at your house in the fall, just for decoration. What are the roots like? Not like that. This guy's 6'6". Look at him holding this prairie grass. This prairie grass right here, they had to photograph it in stages because it's so tall. How tall do you think this is? Or I should say, how deep do you think that is?
8 feet.
More.
12.
12? Higher? Higher than 20?
Oh my goodness.
Whoa, we're getting nuts.
That's a tall guy.
You guys are already doing better than Martin County schools. Because when I was there, I said higher. The kid said 5, I said higher, and he said 3. And then I had to say, who's a teacher? We're gonna need help. Like, we're gonna need help. Which his mom thought that was very funny. But so, 27 feet.
Wow.
27 feet. In this part of Minnesota, in New Ulm, prairie roots are only limited in depth by till. Once we hit that till plane, they can't get past that. So depending on how much erosion has happened, depending on all of those sorts of biological factors, that's how deep they can go. Glacial till, it's like, it's a hard.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're done.
That's why ours are.
Yep.
That's right.
So pretty amazing. And then also, not only do they do that, not only do these roots grow, but as these upper roots decompose, they build that organic matter up. So they're constantly building more deep, rich, humusy, dark soil. And it smells good because it's alive. It smells spicy, prairie soils do. The other thing they do is this upper vegetation. You might know it as a prairie instead of upper vegetation. This prairie vegetation right here, some of the plants in it can intercept 87% of the rainfall that's coming down because of their leaves. So they grab it, they pull it in, and they funnel it down into their roots. So they store carbon and they store water, because as soon as you build up this organic matter layer, you also build pore space in the soil. Look at that thing. Can you imagine if you had a dandelion fork and you were trying to pop that sucker out of the ground? You'd be there forever. Like, it just would never happen. So, more math. I know, you're ready. I'm ready. I'm proud of this one. So, lawns need roughly 1 inch of water per week. Okay, that's a silly number to tell people because you're not out there with your hose going and a ruler. That's about an inch, I think. Like, that's kind of a silly metric, right? So 1 inch of water on 1 acre of land is 27,000 gallons, roughly, right? If your yard, let's say your yard's 1/10 of an acre, okay? Roughly average yard size in New Ulm, 1/10 of an acre. Then you need 2,700 gallons per week. It's a lot of gallons, right? So then if you think about that, the growing season's roughly May to October that you might be watering this lawn. 6 months, 4 weeks, you need 65,000 gallons over the growing season to maintain your lawn, right? And some people use more than that because they're just out there watering all the time, like whether you need to be or not, right? But then I did the math for New Ulm's water bill. And you may know that New Ulm has a tiered water bill system, which I applaud them for. So do you know this? Your water bill is tiered. So if you use a lesser amount of gallons, you pay less. If you use more gallons, you pay more. Everybody's going, what? You guys need to look at those bills. Don't just pay them, look at them. So in New Ulm, and let me see if I wrote this down because I don't remember all of it. I know, shocking that I wouldn't remember every single number of the water bill. Here we go. So if you use less than 5,000 gallons, it's $3.80 per 1,000 gallons, okay? If you use above 5,000 gallons, it's $4.75. So if you do, and then you have a meter charge of roughly $14 a month. Some people have a different, it's based on what kind of meter you have.
Wait a minute, you said the water was more expensive if you used more of it
Yes,
per 1,000 gallons?
yes,
All right.
yep. So if you use more, you're charged more.
No, you charge more per gallon.
Yes,
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, okay.
yes. You're charged $4.80 or
Usually it's the other
$4.75.
way around.
Yeah, if you use more, you're charged more per gallon.
All right.
So, okay, math. Now you're looking at all these numbers and you're like, where's she going with this, right? But out of this 65,000 gallons that you're using to water your lawn, on your water bill for that 6 months, it only translates to $247 to $308. That should tell you 2 things right away. 1, we're vastly undervaluing our water, considering we all need it to survive. The second thing it should tell you, because when I first did this, I was hoping for a big number, because I was going to shock your budget into not having a lawn. Like, that was my whole strategy. But then I saw this and I was like, dang it, like, it's not even that high. But then you gotta think about it like this. If you had an extra $247 to $308, right? If you had that, you could go to the movies 21 to 27 times. Or half that many if you took a friend. You could play 18 holes of golf at the New Ulm Country Club 13 to 17 times with a cart. You could rent the New Ulm Rec Center, or you could go to the New Ulm Rec Center 27 to 34 times. Pretty nice. And if you didn't want to see anybody else, you could rent the whole pool for 3 hours. She's happy about that. Or, because I work for the DNR, you could go camping at a Minnesota State Park for $30 a night, 4 to 5 weekends out of the summer. Almost a whole month, you could go camping at Minnesota State Parks. And that message is approved by all of those people. They're very happy about it. So it doesn't seem like a lot, and so it tells us right away, right, that like we're undervaluing our water, but it also is a lot if you think about how we might want to spend our summer. That money does translate into fun things that we could do. So change. How do we get there? I thought it was funny because I was talking to a coworker and I was like, here's this presentation I'm going to give. I have these slides. Do you like them? And she goes, I don't see the difference. She goes, I don't understand how that is different than that. So we got to explain it. So basically in a conventional drainage neighborhood, you have these flat lanes. You got this nice little boulevard. Every little square has a little tree. It looks like they're all the same species. Great. Not great, in case there's disease or something else. And basically all the water runs right into the storm drain. When you move to low impact design, they have these little dips here, like a little swale. And so as the water runs off of the houses and off of the road, it all runs here into the vegetation first. So it gets a chance to filter in. Down here, you got this awesome house right here, this Ruth Ann's house. Just kidding, it's not. She's got this vegetation here, and then all of the runoff from the roof and everything runs right into the storm drain. Whereas here, you have this house, not a great picture, apologize for that. But you have a 2-story house, the storm drain is over here, and you have all of this landscaping to catch the runoff, so it has a chance to filter in. So when you look at your house, that's what you're thinking about. How do I catch water before it makes it to the street? And if you're like, what's a storm drain? I guarantee if you're on a corner, you have one. It's that little grate under the curb cut of the sidewalk. In some places, they're labeled and say, drains right to river. In New Ulm, they're not labeled like that. So I already spoiled this a little bit in the beginning. We're bringing you back up. Do you feel it? It's happening. We're bringing you back up. So diversity is the #1 indicator of health in any system. I'll give you an example. Let's say you had a car. Let's say I took away the horn. Is it still a car? What if I took away the brakes? Is it still a car? It's a car. It's a less safe car. Why are you driving that thing? What if I took away the engine? Is it a car? It's still a car. It just doesn't do what it's functionally supposed to do, right? Ecosystems are the same way. Species are those parts. We don't know the horns and the engines and the seatbelts and whatever. We don't know the role that they're all playing. But I bet you we will know when we take away engines. So that's the challenge of being an ecologist. It's a complex, interconnected system. When you take things away, you lose functionality. You lose resilience. You lose the ability to be a car. You lose the ability to function like an ecosystem. So diversity is super, super important. It allows us to adapt to change. I work on the prairie. In the last couple of years with the drought, I have never seen so much side oats. Side oats is this adorable little grass. Botanists are very common sense people. It has a seed head that looks like tiny oats that are growing on one side. Botanists are very common sense people. Side oats, one side. So that plant loves a drought. Loves it. It does amazing in a drought. I have never seen so much of it. And the first thing that happens is our land managers call me and they're like, I got a problem on my prairie. I got so much side oats. What do I do? But the prairie is doing exactly what it should do. Because it has diversity and we have a drought, it's adapting to that ebb and flow of change and it's changing with it. There's one constant on the prairie and that's change. So what we want to do when we start thinking about our lawn, how do we get there, how do we make these changes, one of the things we want to think about is who we're trying to support. And whether you want to or not, you will attract bees. And that's a good thing. I have so many bees in my yard, they don't bother me at all. It's absolutely fine. So these are bee species, and this is kind of their typical season. You'll notice that bumblebees are our largest bee family, and they're out pretty much all season long. So queen bumblebees, have you ever seen a male bumblebee at the end of the season just hanging out on a flower? Looking like they're just lazy, like doing nothing. They're just sitting on a flower. Have you ever seen this? What do you think they're doing? They're sitting on that flower. They're waiting to die. I'm not kidding. They don't make it. All the men die in a bee colony. And then I'm just telling you how nature works. I didn't design it, okay? I didn't make it happen. For the men in the audience, I'm sorry. This is what happens to male bumblebees. I'm just telling you. So queen bumblebees have the entire colony inside of them, and they overwinter. Their blood literally turns to something like antifreeze, and they nest underground, and they emerge in the spring with the entire colony inside of them. If they come out in April, and there's nothing for them to eat, what do you think happens? They also die, right? Nature is not messing around. They need stuff to eat. And so when you're thinking about designing your yard, I like to think about bumblebees and what blooms earliest in Minnesota. So that would be things like pasque flowers. Sometimes that's trees and shrubs are blooming before anything else is blooming. And so you want to think about your yard and how you can build diversity in so you can support as many species as possible. So steps. First and foremost, I put this first because it's important, right? You don't want to spend a lot of time getting super excited about your yard, getting really excited about all the native plants, buying all of them, planting all of them, and then the city saying, nope. That is not a good situation. In New Ulm, we're actually really lucky. The main ordinance that we have is for the boulevard. So the boulevard is that space between the road and the sidewalk. So that's technically owned by the city, but managed by you. You're welcome. So you can't put things in the boulevard other than a tree that grows higher than 6 inches. So anywhere else, as long as it looks like landscaping, as long as it looks intentional, you can pretty much do what you want. I would highly recommend contacting the city engineer before you put in a native planting, if you're gonna go for a more wild native planting like what's at my house, just to make sure that they know you're doing this on purpose. At my house, there's also 20 signs that say this is for bees, this is for birds, just to help people kind of get comfortable with the change. So after you sort of do that investigation, which is important, you want to start thinking about where are you going to put your garden? What shape is it going to be? Do you have shade? Do you have sun? What kind of soil do you have? These things matter. So certain plants only grow in the shade, certain plants only grow in the sun. Some plants don't like their feet wet, other plants do. And so you want to think about these things because you want to grow things where they're happiest. Also want to think about your budget. You can do it in phases. I was going to make a joke, but then I remembered I'm being recorded. I won't make that joke. It was about working for the state. So when I did mine with my budget, I did it in pieces, right? I didn't do the whole thing. And that helped me. I had a lot of questions because there's lots of ways that you can do site prep, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I'll talk about it now. So one of the ways you can do site prep is you can use clear plastic. So you don't need chemical, you can just use clear plastic, put it over whatever you're trying to kill. It usually takes a season, and then when you lift that plastic up, underneath it is just soil that's ready to be planted into. I didn't have clear plastic, I couldn't find it in New Ulm, so I used black plastic, which isn't the best because black plastic actually reflects the sun off, and so it doesn't heat the soil up as much to kind of kill everything underneath it. It still works, but it's not as great. Also, turns out when you use black plastic in New Ulm, every person who walks by your house will say, hey, you got a body under there? Which makes me wonder where I'm living. Why is that the first question you're asking me? So I have concerns, but that's a story for a different day. So you can do that. You can also use herbicide. You can do tillage, but if you do tillage, it's like setting a bomb off in the soil, and you basically set back all of the biology that's happening in that soil, and you break the soil structure. So that can be good, a temporary good, if that's what you need to do to kind of get that fluffy ground for a little bit. But you also may replant weed seeds and have some bigger problems. So then after all this, think about like your plants, your design, your site prep, your planting, and then your maintenance. Some people will say to you, oh, native plants, they just grow and you don't need to maintain them. That is a lie. Anything you are planting in your yard, you should be prepared to tend it. There's going to be some maintenance. It can be little maintenance. My number one maintenance in my prairie, which I'll show you here in a minute, is I have to cut the trees out constantly, or I have to dig them out because I have trees all over my property. Well, what do trees do? They make baby trees. Like, that's their job. That's part of what they're doing. So then I don't want those trees in the prairie because they'll shade out my beautiful prairie plants. So it's a whole thing. It's fine. I also sometimes get tired of pulling them out and I just use a lawnmower. It's a little more destructive, but it'll cut a tree down really good. So a little note about soils. If you were to go to like Web Soil Survey or kind of an online soil mapping, you typically won't see what your soils are. If you're on a really old lot in New Ulm, it might be close. But most of the time when we build houses, the first thing we do is we take out all the topsoil and then we put fill back in. So fill, F-I-L-L, not P-H-I-L. You gotta be direct with these New Ulm people asking where bodies are. So F-I-L-L, you put back in. So usually you want to do a test where you dig a small hole, you can dump water in, and you can see based on how long it takes for the water to percolate, whether you're on sand, silt, or clay. If the water just sits there, it's probably clay, like for a while. So this is kind of the matching. Like if you have excessively drained, so that's like a sandy site, sand, gravel, you're gonna want a dry seed mix or plants that like dry conditions. Somewhat excessively drained, this would be something that's just sandy, dry, mesic. What does mesic mean? It means in between dry and wet. Moderately well drained, mesic, well drained, mesic, somewhat poorly drained, hey, wet mesic. I would imagine that if you get to very poorly drained, you should move. Your house is on a wetland and no one told you. Just give it back to nature. Quit. No, I'm just kidding. You probably shouldn't. If you do have a yard that's that wet, we got bigger problems. I mean, you can still plant plants, but it's not going to fix the other problems. Okay, so design. Lawns to Legumes is a program by Bowser. I love this program. So you can apply for cost share through this program, so you can get money to basically transform your lawn. And what comes with that program is they have scientists like me, but probably not as cool. Okay, but they do have scientists like me who are there to help you figure out how to design this. And I think that's nice. So if you get selected, and they're giving out, I don't know how many, I'm not part of the program, so I don't know how many grants they give out, but they give out quite a few. And what I tell people when you're thinking about design is it's your yard. Okay, so think, like, obviously I want you to plant native plants because they just do better, right? They're adapted to here. They need less water. You don't need to fertilize them. You don't have to baby them along. They just are supposed to grow here. But if you really like hostas or tulips, it's your yard. Do what you want to do, right? Like, make it make sense for you. I have a lot of hostas because my grandma loved them and I love them, but I also have a lot of native plants. This is my aunt's yard, and I say yard, but she has no grass anywhere in her lawn. And I'm showing this because you can also think about stages. So this is her high traffic area up to her front steps, and this is all creeping thyme. Creeping thyme isn't necessarily native, but it's also not invasive. Oh, I told you, now we're gonna have to power through the last slides. That's the timer. Right here she has more creeping thyme, and then she has a manicured flower bed out front, and then her backyard is absolutely wild. Like she has all kinds of things going on. Like you can't even see her when she's sitting back there. It's just like a full-on jungle. So there are options. I also like on that Bowser's website, that Lawns to Legumes, they have sample designs. So here's a sample color-coded design here where it's telling you which plants go in which circle to make a pleasing design. And then right here, this is a really terrible graphic, I shouldn't use it, but it's a whole thing about here's the kind of wildlife that are coming to your yard. Oh, and they're coming into your garden. It's very exciting. I have to go fast now, so we got, we only have a couple minutes. So when you're thinking about species, I know this gets a little sciencey, but bear with me. You don't just want to think about flowers. Flowers are great, we love flowers, but what are insects doing when they're not in a flower? They're in their homes. Where are their homes? I don't know, lady, you're the expert, you tell me. They're either in the ground or they're in the grass. So you want to make sure that you're having some element of grass, and also a lot of insects in their larval stage eat grass. One of my favorite insects, it's one of our Dakota skippers. I think it's Dakota skippers. I can't exactly, it's one of the skipper species. When they're a larva, they sit at the base of a grass as a fat, chubby larva, and they pull blades of grass down and they munch on that grass and they just sit there. That's like the whole 6-month part of their life cycle. They're literally a couch potato, just eating grass. And then they make themselves a hut out of grass to protect themselves. Nature's neat. It's really cool. So you want to think about grasses, cool season, so those are ones that bloom in the cooler months. Warm season, those are ones that bloom in the warmer months. And then legumes, so those are bean plants, or non-legume forbs. Forbs are wildflowers. And then you want to plant flowers that bloom all throughout the season. So this is early season. Spiderwort is a great one. Spiderwort is an awesome plant because as it gets hot, like as we have those 90-degree June days, the flower will close. And so then when it opens back up in the morning, if you're lucky, there's usually a bee inside that got stuck while the flower closed. And so then it just had to hang out, like it was closing time, it didn't make it out. And so that's always a pretty exciting thing to see, and that's what happened here. So the flower opened, and there's the bee wrapped around the center of the flower. You want to think about things that bloom in early summer, late summer, and then fall. This is goldenrod, and so for everybody who's like, goldenrod has gotten a bad rap that it doesn't deserve. So a lot of people think that they're allergic to goldenrod. I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to tell you if you're allergic to it or not allergic to it, right? But most of the time, what people are allergic to is ragweed, which is blooming at the same time as goldenrod, and they both kind of have a yellowish green flower sometimes. And so people usually say, oh, goldenrod, it's making me sneeze. Ironically, a Dakota medicine for allergies is goldenrod. So it's not actually making you sneeze, it's the thing you need to stop you from sneezing. So, ironically, but you want to have them blooming all season long, because remember the bumblebee's out all season long, we gotta give it food. And then you want to think about picking plants from all different kinds of plant families. And you don't have to know all of this stuff, there's people who will help you with these things. So there's resources online where you can start thinking about species. I love the Minnesota Wildflowers webpage. It's structured where there's a section of it where you can say what's blooming now, and then you can see all the plants, and then you can kind of decide, oh, I like you, you're cute, I'll take you home. So it's kind of like a pet store, but for plants, right? Like you can look at them and you can start planning your garden. You want to make sure, oh, I gotta mention this really quick. You want to make sure that you pick plants that actually are native to Minnesota. So this is spiderwort, and this is just a graphic to show that this is bracted spiderwort, which is the one that you probably want to plant. Nurseries will also sell Ohio spiderwort, and then the other spiderwort, whose common name I can't remember. So Ohio spiderwort is a spiderwort that is in Indiana and kind of the lower Midwest. And so unless you live in these counties, you really don't want to plant that one. You want to plant this one. So be talking to them about things that are native to your area. Why is that important? Because native plants are adapted to your area. They're adapted to the climate. You have to water them less. You have to baby them less. It's what you want. Also, I mentioned you can get seeds or you can get plugs. Plugs are like a flat of pansies that you might get. You can also get pots of plants. And I highly, highly, highly recommend signs. So So this plant says native plants at work. I really like this yard sign. I actually have it because it's a little shameful and self-promoting. So it says native plants at work, and then in the text it says my native plants are working hard for you, which I think that's really clever. And they talk about how they're filtering water, they're holding soil in place, and they're keeping it out of the Minnesota River. That's pretty clever. So your yard is like a little billboard of, I'm so much better than you at this. I got native plants. This is a habitat sign on a post there. Again, I strongly encourage you to have signs. So native plant suppliers, this is Minnesota DNR website. We have broken the state up into the south, northwest, northeast, and the central region, and it's a whole list of suppliers who offer native plants. So they can also help you design your yard. They can help you figure out exactly what you need to be doing there, because DNR doesn't have the capacity to design lawns everywhere. I know, sad day, but true. Now, what's this all look like? I'm not going to get too much into all of the ins and outs of planting, but I really do like solarization. Why do I like it? One, because people just ask you many questions, but two, because it works and it's easy. So all you need to do is go to a local farm store, pick up a lot of plastic. I'm not in love with that part of it, but you can reuse the plastic for different parts of your yard. I had to anchor it because this is a pretty good slope in front of my house here. It's windy on the prairie in New Ulm, right? So the plastic, as we were laying it down, kept blowing up and I was almost trapped in it. So we had to put bricks and other things on top of it. But this is after just about a month, and you really should be doing it for about 3 months, because you can see the vegetation's dead, but it hasn't fully turned into soil. So if you give it longer, it'll fully turn into soil. I know I do this for a job, but I'm also really impatient. So I put that plastic down and then I just whipped it right back off of it and then planted into it. But here is my year one. So I have on each side in front different wild flower gardens, and then on the edges I have manicured ones so that there's an option. And in case you're wondering how this is received, we get the gamut in New Ulm. So during the pandemic, I was working from home, and my windows would be open, and I cannot tell you how many parents with kids would stop by my yard. Do you see the beetle? Look at the beetle. Do you see the butterfly? Look at the butterfly. Oh, look at that. No, don't touch it. Don't touch it! But just, lots of joy and excitement because they have a place to learn right there. I came outside the one day, and a lady was like, oh, hey, do you live here? No, I'm just breaking in. You caught me. I'm coming outside of the house. Yes, I live here. And she's like, oh, I just wanted to tell you, I changed my route to walk by your yard because I absolutely love it. And I know nothing about you, but in my mind, you're the people who love plants. And I was like, well, in your mind, you're right on, sister. We do love plants. We also get the people that go, this is a travesty. So that happens too. I mean, be prepared. It's not for everyone, but the great part is that we live in New Ulm and we have the flexibility to do this. The other great part is that I have seen, just going outside my front door, so many different kinds of wildlife. I wish that I would have put them in the presentation, but I didn't. I've seen sphinx moths, which literally are the size of hummingbirds, and they're loud as they come, and I'm thinking to myself, how'd you find this place? If you ever see me outside, I'm usually talking to an animal. An insect. Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Because it's still incredibly amazing to me that the adage really is true. If you build it, they will come. And it does matter. In the fall, I have so many monarchs that are just hanging out, fueling up so that they can make their way down to Mexico. My yard is now part of this bigger connected ecosystem. No, I don't have a bison, but I do have so many different kinds of wildlife at my house, which makes me very, very excited. So I'm just saying that's a little teaser and a taste of what you can do and how you can be the change. And if you have questions, I'm here until the library closes, which is in 6 minutes.
Go over again the resources for help.
So Native Plant Suppliers website. If you our website is not. I was gonna say again something bad. I forget. I'm still being recorded. Our website is not the most user friendly. So in the Google machine, type Native Plant Suppliers Minnesota DNR, and that'll be the fastest way to find it. And then you have all of the lists in there. Minnesota Wildflowers is a website where you can look at all kinds of native plants. And then if you also just Googled like Prairie Nurseries Minnesota, there's going to be 3 top commercial nurseries that come up in every search. I'm not saying them because I work for the government and I can't have favoritism. But if you do that Google search, you're gonna find them. Like, Manon, that's you.
Okay, well, I didn't know if there was something behind me. How deep, remind me again how deep the hole to see how.
Oh, so that I didn't explain very well. I should have a picture of it too. So if you Google yard infiltration test, they'll tell you how to do it. I think it's like 6 inches, and then you put in I forget. It's like a cup of water, and then you time it, and then you add another cup of water, and then you time it. And based on how fast that infiltrates, it tells you kind of what soil you need. You can also just call a native plant supplier and say, I got a yard and I need to plant stuff in it, and they'll help you figure that out. So
Okay, I just was wondering.
Did you do seed or plugs?
both. So that's a good point. So plugs give you more control over placement. Seed, it's where it is, right? So I did seed on those, let's go back one. Can I do that? No, because I turned this off. The library closes in 4 minutes. Okay, so here's all seeds. And again, because this is the first year, while it looks beautiful for those of you who were using your keen eye, and I'm talking about diversity, you're like, but it's all one species that's blooming. It's all Black-Eyed Susan, because Black-Eyed Susan is a weak perennial, and it's the very first plant to come up. So this year, that was last year, this year what we saw are all different kinds of things coming up, and that's normal. Your prairie should change through time. So plugs gives you more placement. You're gonna spend anywhere between $3 and $10 a plug. It just depends on how, I know, it's not cheap. We only have less than 2% of prairie left in Minnesota. It can't do it all, and it's expensive to try to put it back.
It's that money
So.
we saved with our water bill.
Is that money you save with your water bill? The other thing is last year with the drought, we were having a little party next door, and my neighbor had a friend over who I'd never met, and he said, how often do you water your yard? And I was like, never. And he was like, what? And I was like, I don't water my yard. In fact, I'm trying to get rid of yard. And he was like, your yard is the only thing that's green on this whole block. Native plants, man. They're doing what they do. I don't need to water.
You showed a picture of the topsoil runoff into the river and
Yes.
ultimately. And I just remember, 100 years ago, I heard that it takes 100 years of plants decaying to make 1 inch of topsoil.
It
Is that
depends.
true?
It depends. I'm giving you my best scientist answer. It depends. So, but it does. So it can depend. It depends on your soil type, and it depends on what you put in that soil, how long it takes to grow. So sometimes it could take 100 years, if not 1,000 years, for some soil types. Others you could get within 10 years to build an inch. It just depends on the soil type and what you put into it. One thing I can tell you for sure is if you put prairie into it, you're gonna get there a lot faster. Building and holding that soil. And it's just, we can do all the math in the world, right? But look at those roots. Of course they're holding stuff in place. You just can't have roots like that and not be doing a great job. So, I mean, that's just, and if you think about, we roll up lawn. Lawn has nothing on, we're talking about, let's see, I gotta do more math. At least 6 Megans planted into the ground. I'm Megan, 6 of me. Planted into the ground, prairie roots. That's wild. Sometimes I won't make you do it, but we have school kids like line up and stretch out a tape and see how long they think the prairie roots are. It's wild to think about. You guys think we're all gonna be trapped in here? We're gonna be tenting sooner than later? If you have questions, feel free to send me an email, and I'll give you more resources. This doesn't work again, so I don't know what I'm trying to do. That's my email, megan.benage@state.mn.us.
All right, thanks everybody. Oh, thank you, Megan. Good job. Now, this is, as I said, this is the first of 4. So I'll give you a pitch for our next event, which is April 4th. And it's all about rebates, incentives, resources, and opportunities. And we're back to energy saving. This is near and dear to my heart because we got a big rebate check from the city after we built our new house and had made sure that we were doing all energy saving lights and that sort of thing. So this will save you some money. Derek Nelson from the city will be here. So thank you all for coming. It's lovely. And hope to see you on April 4th.